Welcome back, everybody, for the next episode of the Unlock Your Inner Creator. I am the host, Noilyn Mendoza, and I'm so excited for the next guest. I know her on a very personal level. She's actually helped me get back on track with my health. Dr. Angelica Alberto wears lots of different hats. In many ways, she is an all-around practitioner of health and wellness, and she's really revolutionizing modern medicine by challenging the status quo of conventional practices. Her practice combines the lens from both Western and Eastern medicine to bring a holistic mind, body, and soul approach back into how people receive and experience care. With a doctorate in physical therapy, a master's in public health, and an integrative health coach, she addresses the root causes of chronic pain, fatigue, and weight management challenges. She also focuses on reducing chronic diseases by identifying and addressing early signs of nervous system and internally rooted metaphysical imbalances. Overall, Dr. Angelica's mission is to help as many people reclaim their vitality and thrive in all aspects of their life. So with that being said, welcome, Angelica. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Noilyn. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So we always start these conversations by calling in different energies or calling in people that may have influenced us in our lives and in our own personal journeys. Who do you want to call in today?
Yes, I always start my days, and especially in this space, connecting to my grandma Angela, or Lolalita, and she had always shared this lens of looking at life through what I call rose-colored lens, and it just brings grace and compassion into everything, and that's just what I want to bring into this space today.
Beautiful. What would you say been some of the biggest lessons or wisdom that she has bestowed on you?
Yeah, so much. I was really connecting to her earlier today through prayer. It was one of the most grounding things that I'm learning to appreciate more than ever as an adult now, that she taught me when I was growing up. And it's prayer that's always grounded me through all of the work that I do. And honestly, there was a point in my life where I almost felt a little disconnected, simply because the whole experience that religion has been evolving in this human existence, and you know how it goes, we can start to completely blanket all religious experiences as what the stigma is. But now I've made prayer more personal and something that's allowed me to ground the work that I do, because I realized that I cannot shoulder everything that gets placed on me on my own will. It's when I expand my container through prayer to be that vessel for whatever it is my role on this earth is. And that's what prayer has ultimately been able to give me. And so that's something that I thank her all the time.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for talking about just being this clear channel and a way to connect to that which is greater than us. That being said, I mean, you went right in there, right? You're bringing the spirituality piece. You have such an interesting background because on one end, you are clinically trained in this bio-Western medical model. And then on the other end, you also are trained in Eastern practices and many traditional modalities. I'm very curious how you got there, how you are able to think about melding the two. And then maybe you could speak a little bit about your personal journey. What have been pivotal points that have led you here today?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say that it all really started with my grandma, too, someone who had been such a pivotal role in my life, that when she progressively got sick in the last few years of her life, it was something that really opened my eyes at an early age of, is this something that could have been changed? The last years of her life, did she have to experience the degrading quality of life that was always only reliant on a laundry list of medications given by her doctor Could there have been another approach in just how she could have lived and experienced that last part of whatever it was meant for her? And when I started questioning that, I went down this rabbit hole. And in that journey, I still honestly was not conscious to the whole metaphysical experience that comes with healing or just health in general. And what really knocked me off my feet was when I started to personally experience my own health issues later on when I was 19 years old. And when I was a second year in undergrad, I was studying exercise science because I knew that movement was going to be a vehicle in how we can help a lot of people come back to their bodies and essentially move a lot of physical symptoms through. And the ironic part was in that journey, I started to get sick. I was experiencing debilitating migraines almost twice a week. My blood pressure, it was skyrocketing through the roof, almost 150 over 90. And
You're so young, 19.
19 years old.
Wow.
Is what we would describe in conventional medicine as hypertensive. So, of course, my parents freaked out. And my mom's a nurse, so she was like, you need to go to a primary care physician. So I was in and out of the doctors for probably what was a 2 to 3 year experience where I would go to my doctors and she would sit me down for about maybe 10, not more than 20 minutes, and basically constitute the symptoms I was experiencing to stress. And she was like, let me actually put you on some kind of antihypertensive medication, just a low-grade dose. But there was something in me, I don't know what it was, but it was the strongest feeling that was the biggest no, that even at a time when I was still unconscious to that inner intuition, gut, whatever it is that we want to call it, let me just pick up the prescription medications and let me try to sift through this on my own. So that's essentially what led up to this whole Pandora's box that's led me to today of exploring what are the ways that we can heal, at least understand the silent, subtle symptoms that our bodies are trying to tell us something is wrong. And in that journey, when I started to dive deeper, understanding that when I paid more attention to those cues, I realized, one, my body was always under this constant state of fight or flight. And in physiological terms, we may have heard of what's called the sympathetic response, fight or flight, like your body's about to run away from a bear, or parasympathetic, where we're resting, digesting, recovering, and healing. So we need a good ebb and flow of both. But essentially, my body was tonically running in this survivalistic mechanism. Therefore, my heart rate was higher than it was supposed to be. My blood pressure was higher than it was supposed to be. So I would have chronic feelings of anxiety. And that was nothing that anyone could ever give me language for until I started to explore inside. And that started with talk therapy, which opened up this whole world of internal exploration spiritually. So through that realm, I also learned my huge disconnection to myself. I just created this whole lived, conditioned reality that was so polar opposite from who I truly was at my core. So when you start to realize this perception that you've created for the world to experience of you is not at all the person of who you feel authentically inside, no wonder you feel anxious. No wonder you feel like you're on the verge of a panic attack when you wake up and realize the life you've created is the complete opposite of what you actually want inside. So that's where I had this big awakening of, I can't live my life this way anymore. When I finally could say that who I was on the outside finally felt authentic to who I am on the inside. And that is also when my symptoms physically also subsided.
Wow. You bring up a couple of things that I wanted to dig in a little bit more about. So one thing that you said was you were seeing the physical symptoms and they were saying it was stress. And you're making me think, as a chronic healer, one of the things that we learned is that physical illnesses are the last manifestation of something else that's happening to you emotionally, maybe mentally. And so you showing up with panic attacks and high blood pressure and getting these migraines is also making me think this disconnection that you were feeling was actually being manifested, being physicalized as something else. And this idea around embodiment and disembodiment is something that I'm actually really receiving from you when you were able to connect that, how fast it was for your symptoms to dissipate.
Mm.
And yet, when you were going to your primary care doctor, they were diagnosing you and saying that it was stress related, and then they were giving you medication for it. So you might treat it immediately, but we're not really talking about how did you get here? What were the root causes of your anxiety and your stress?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you bring up so many good points where when you mention embodiment, that is what I feel is really missing from the medicine that so many people are receiving from conventional medicine. And that is also a process because in this westernized go, go, go society, we're stuck up here and we're thinking that in order to heal a lot of the physical symptoms, we must only treat with thought or with some external substance, but never the root. And something that came up for me when you brought that up is in this emerging health and wellness movement, lots of different angles and facets of integrative medicine and spiritual medicine, beautiful different things. But what tends to happen is we get so lost in the sauce of relying on things and modalities outside of us, heal something going on inside of us. So there is a big missing gap of questioning truly what is the root that is causing a lot of these physicalized symptoms coming from imbalance inside.
And you're making me also think that if the solution is external, where is the person in this, and where is their own agency, their own power in this? It's almost like you're leaving something that is in you, right, to something else that is outside of you.
Yes. Agency is so, I love that you bring that up because agency is what's often taken away from most of the collective. Why? Because that's power. And where does the power go? It goes to where the control is, where the money is. And what essentially is happening, though, is a recognition of a lot of people starting to question that. They're like, I don't really feel comfortable about that. I don't feel like that's right, but they just don't know where to turn to. That's why this system still exists.
You're making me think about your story. You were so young when this happened. And normally, okay, I go to the doctor, they're an authority figure, they're much older, they're more educated. But you had said something in your story. There was something in you that was like, this doesn't feel right. And I'm sure that there are people who are listening to this, maybe had a similar experience, but perhaps didn't have a similar response. They sometimes tamper it down because then you start thinking, well, I'm not as smart. I don't have this background, but there's something that's in them that's saying, this seems off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did it take for you to tap in to listening to that intuition, gut feeling, whatever you want to call it? But there was something in you that was telling you, learn about this more, go down that rabbit hole, and let's research this a bit more so that we can really understand what's going on.
That's something now that I, in hindsight, have so much grounding and clarity around. And I feel like throughout my life, and this can go back to just the strong connection I had to my Lola, who had brought prayer into my life. And I've always felt so just naturally intuitive or spiritual, but I felt like I always had to push it away because I was so heavily ingrained in the Western conventional medicine system, just because of what I've been trained to do and look at when it comes to health. But at that early point in time, I almost called it anxiety. And when I didn't listen to the anxiety was pushing me to do, it got stronger. And it felt so debilitating at some points because I was disconnecting from what I felt my God-given potential and what my skills were meant to be in this lifetime as, a bridge, a wayshore, whatever it is we want to call it. But I just feel this innate, strong mission to help what I would call my brothers and sisters to self-realize their own potential. But we don't have a lot of people awakening to that yet because they have so many physical related symptoms that are blinding them from being able to connect to that.
Yeah, it's like on a very basic level, it's almost carnal. If you're not feeling good, it's hard to actually think about anything else.
Yeah.
Because the physical is just so powerful. If we're not dealing with the physical, how can we go to higher levels of consciousness?
Right.
Right?
It's the last thing we're going to think about. Imagine when we're deep in the middle of beating a flu, the only thing we're thinking about is drinking water, trying to keep food down, or just like breathe, because sometimes the fever sucks so bad. So yeah, the last thing I'm going to think about is my connection to divine, my connection to higher source or whatever, when my vessel isn't clean, it's not healthy.
Yeah. Well, and then now it's making me also just wonder, there's so many people walking around who are in physical pain because of chronic conditions. Yeah, what does that mean? Maybe it's a big question. What does it mean for humanity? But if there's so many people suffering, and it's not just one condition, it's a lot of it is comorbidities, right? You as a holistic practitioner, because you are trained in various modalities, I'm curious about that path. And especially helping people, because you specialize in helping people with chronic conditions. Most people would become a doctor, or I would become a nurse. Those are the clinicians that we think of that are treating these everyday symptoms that people experience. I'm curious, why physical therapy? And, why I end up looking at all these like physical therapy, ended up getting a master's in public health, and then you went on to become a health coach. Talk to me a little bit about your journey and why you chose that path as opposed to, maybe going the traditional medicine route.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And truthfully, how it really started was back when I was in high school. I honestly wanted to initially be an immigration lawyer because a lot of my family was like coming from the Philippines, and I all know that struggle of how hard it is to get our people here, but that just wasn't the path for me as I started feeling more into it. And my first insight into physical therapy was when I had experienced my own injury well into my sophomore year in high school. And at first I went to urgent care and all they gave me were pain meds. The second experience I had was when I saw a physical therapist. And this was the first time I had ever seen a profession that helped people get back to doing the things they loved. Someone who fractured something can't run anymore. How soul-sucking that is to take something away from someone that thoroughly enjoyed that. And when I started to dive deeper and deeper into what physical therapy was, I learned about how the power of moving our bodies was actual medicine. So my rabbit hole ended up pursuing my doctor of physical therapy, and I fell so in love with exercise science and just helping people learn how to reside in their bodies, because a lot of what traditional internal medicine doctors do is they truthfully can't spend more than 17 minutes. I actually looked this up because I was very curious. 17 minutes with their patients. And it's not, I fully disclaim it is not their fault. It's just because the system
is set up that way.
Right?
Yeah.
So that just didn't feel good to me. And now going forward from that point, when I started going through my physical therapy rotations in hospitals, outpatient chains, private clinics, that still didn't feel good to me because of what 90% of traditional PT is this mill type of in and out insurance model. You get a hot pack even though your pain is caused by something else. And it still was so I'm not going to create a blanket statement around it, but it wasn't providing the level of care that I recognized people needed. So then what inspired me to learn more about integrative health coaching was I loved just how that dynamic of working with people was understanding it is not going to be a quick fix. It's a lifestyle change, but people that are willing to do the work, they just need someone to guide them along that journey. And then they're well on their way, and then they're running. And now I'm in the space of returning back to understanding how I can synthesize my master's in public health degree to take what I learned on a clinical one-on-one sense, but now share this information on a more community population health lens, because working one-on-one is very different from working with a mass group of people. How can you disseminate information that the collective can actually understand that's not so heavily jargon from a medical standpoint? No one's going to receive that. That's what really brought me to this multifaceted up and down place of what I do today.
I mean, I love it though, because it's also responsive. You get your doctorate in physical therapy and you're in situations where you're seeing that it's not enough. For some people, that's the system that we work with, and then that's it. But it's being responsive. Actually, I want to be able to provide more. This is not the kind of practitioner that I want to be. And so let me get additional training so that I can offer that. And then you're bringing the public health piece, which I think is really just a beautiful synergy. And I think an example of, when we think about what is it that we want to create out there in the world, sometimes it is not following one path. It's about an accumulation of all of this training, all of these experiences that make us unique in what we are offering out there.
Right. Because what we personally offer is our medicine for the world. We all have our unique blueprint based off of whatever it was that brought us individually to live and exist on this plane.
Yeah. I am also very curious because at some point you decided to meld Western medicine, Eastern medicine, and looking at this mind, body, soul approach. I'm curious how your clients receive that, because I'm sure that you're probably attracting a certain type of client, but maybe somebody finds you because they need to run again, for example, and they understand that piece. Or maybe someone's like, I actually need help with my diet.
Yeah.
They come at you from a health coaching piece. Yeah, if you could speak a little bit more about this integrative way of really looking at a person much more holistically. And do you feel clients and people out there in general are going in that direction these days, or are you seeing something different?
Yeah. This is something that I've been playing around with since I've officially gone into practice. I feel like I've always done some kind of unconscious work, even through my training. But as of recent, even when I had started in my first job that was a purely cash-based physical therapy clinic, I'm here to get better to run or do my sport. What I started to learn was that there were certain patients or just a population of people who were just getting so attracted to the container of space that I was providing for them, where I didn't pry. I've learned that it's not up to me to guide them towards me. Hey, how's your spiritual health? Hey, how's your emotional health? They have to be ready for it. And I feel I'm in this place now where people will come to me now when they're ready to open that up, but they just don't know how. And when I open that up for them, let's say, very broad example is someone comes in for back pain and we've worked on it for a few weeks and we start to notice patterns. My biggest thing is recognizing patterns that are not just movement based, but what are stress based? What are things going on in your current reality or life, lived experience that might be proliferating into this back pain? So what I always like to open up by asking them is, do you recall any movements that led up to the pain? If they're like, honestly, I'm just doing the same things. And then the next thing, was there anything substantial from a lifestyle standpoint or something stressful that had led up to that point. And they go, oh, you know what? I actually had a really rough argument with my partner. I was like, oh, could you tell me more about that? And as they start to share about that experience, what I start to notice is almost this uplifting, this ability to just express whatever density was going on in their body. After that finishes or just comes to a resolution, they're like gasping for air that, wow, I feel so much better.
Yeah, and you didn't even lay hands on them.
I didn't lay hands, or truthfully, just give them a little bit of neck traction just to help offload tension from their neck. And even that somatic just support, that touch, helps guide them to feel safe in their bodies, because when they typically are expressing things emotionally, they don't feel safe. That's essentially what is the container that I help support people with. And it's always fluid.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up safety. I think that is so critical and oftentimes not talked about.
No.
Especially when it comes to wellness, when it comes to your health. The level of safety that this practitioner can provide, right? And the level of safety that a patient or a client feels. I'm really into audiobooks, especially when I drive, because I have two young kids. And so sometimes reading is very interrupted. And if I want to get through a book, I have to do audiobooks. And I've been listening to Dr. Gabor Mate, and one of his books is The Myth of Normal. And one thing that I was really struck by in that book, you know, he's also a medically trained physician. And he was saying that what we don't do enough from a health point of view is to actually talk to the patients and to understand, as you mentioned, their lifestyle, their history, what happened to them. And sometimes we only go as far back as what caused this injury, but it could actually be further than that, is really understanding this person's story. Right. And it's just leading up to it. And when you were talking about safety, I mean, I think that's such an important piece. How could you even hold space for your client in walking alongside with them in their wellness journey when they don't even feel safe in their bodies? Maybe they have stories that they haven't contended with for a very long time. And then you add on the layer, as you were saying, then we confine them to what the system is saying, the parameters. I can only see you for 17 minutes. Yeah. How do you build rapport with somebody for that short amount of time? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a important part in being a provider of anything, whether you are in the health industry, you are in the beautification industry, aesthetics, nails. When we are just in service of others, we are reflecting back to them the level of our understanding of ourselves. So I realized very early on in my career that my ability to go deep with a patient is not at all based on the ABC suit behind my name. It's not the number of continuing education courses that I'm taking every single month. It is the internal work that I'm committing to every single day so that I'm not projecting my things on the person that I get the opportunity of working with.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you've had so much experience with the energetics of how we hold space with ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just in coaching leaders and working with businesses, it's so true. I think in general, it doesn't matter what field you're in. If you are in service to your client, you can only take them as far as you're willing to go. And sometimes that is the work. It's not to get them to a certain outcome. What am I doing to be the best at this so that I can show up the best?
Yes.
Yeah, for them.
It's such an important nuance and perspective shift that really goes to anything in life. If there is something not going as planned or just not going to the degree of how we would like something to be in our lives, it's most likely something that's coming in from ourselves that we just haven't been prepared or are ready for. So it's up to us to be able to question and just be skeptical about, okay, well, what is the way that I can work on myself so that I can be a much, better conduit for this person. For example, when I am working with a very complex patient, and I only call it complex because there's multiple layers to it. And initially, we'll be like, wow, this is a lot. But no, Angelica, take a step back. Where is it that I can come at this situation with grace? And how can I just hold that grace for them as they're experiencing whatever it is they're going through? Because honestly, through a lot of the training I've done, I've worked with a lot of my colleagues who, after going into a complex, I call it complex in the sense that there's a lot of psychological components. There's a lot of mental, emotional distress. They're like, oh my God, that patient was crazy. That is not up to you to label someone crazy. It's your due diligence to be able to hold space for them because that's why they're coming to you, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, I was really thinking about the care that's needed as a space holder. So whether you are a health practitioner, whether you're a coach, whether you lead a team, we are creating constant spaces and we're holding those spaces, we're facilitating those spaces.
Yes.
What do you think is needed to be space holder that can create safe spaces, but I would also say brave spaces in a lot of ways, because you're asking people to stretch, to expand, sometimes even beyond what they're comfortable. And you literally see it because they're stretching themselves physically, but I think also emotionally and mentally too.
Every time. I mean, I feel like the prerequisite, or what does it really take to be able to hold that safe space for people to go through it with them? One is recognizing you as the facilitator in that experience. You must come at it with just absolute grace, and also coming forward in that space like, I am so dialed into the here and now for this person, and the understanding that it is no longer about me. How important is that? Because it's so easy, especially as practitioners in this conventional medicine paradigm, for it to be all about me. I am the best. I am this hierarchy over the patient, blah, blah, blah. No, it's also recognizing we are working here together in collaboration. So what can I do to support you like you are family, to support you like you are my most favorite and loved person, and really just share and pour that love into them. And just one last note, what comes up for me with sharing that is just an unresounding and radical love for self, because that's the love that we're able to push out and share with whoever's in that space with us.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for tying it back into love, because this is an act of love.
Right.
And if we can see it as an act of love, as opposed to it's my job, or it's a chore, or it's obligation, or it's part of the project that I'm doing, I have to do it. But how different would it be if we come at it from centering love?
So different.
Yeah.
And just when you were sharing those different contrasts, we can feel the density and energy, and just
Totally.
Like, God, I have to do this. I have 8 people today. Every day, look at my calendar and I'm like, I get to help 4 people today. That's awesome. And just prepare the container that you are going to have to hold, that you get to hold for these people today. It's
Yeah.
so
So beautiful. I want to shift a little bit, because I know that you're also an avid learner. What's inspiring you these days, or is there anything that you're curious about?
Yeah, where is my mind? I am studying different things. From the biggest thing for me right now is really exploring how to share information about how our health and well-being is not only the physical health, but it's how our physical health is tied to our nutritional health, and how our nutritional health is tied to our mental and emotional health. So it's really showing that we can't silo these spaces anymore. And when we start to address all of these things cohesively, then people have a much have more spaciousness, to no longer worry about the imbalances going on physically. So then once again, they can come back to a place of self-realization, self-love, or whatever it is.
It's hard to get to that space, right? I always think about something that I had read, and I don't know if it was on Facebook or Instagram, but it was, don't make a decision or don't move when you're stressed, when you haven't slept, when you're like hungry. You're not going to make a clear decision. It's going to come from a very tainted place.
Right. You're just naturally going to decisions and choose a timeline of lived reality from lack. Lack because I'm not thinking clearly, because I have brain fog, because I didn't eat enough, because I haven't moved my body in like God knows how long, and then we start to see ourselves as not being enough, when that is not at all what our truth is. And when we start to work on these layer by layer of nourishing our bodies, nourishing our minds and our hearts, then we can come back to a remembrance of our purest essence of enoughness and abundance, of which is like our birthright.
Yeah. And which allows us to be more creative.
Yes.
Yeah. So speaking of creativity, I feel like a lot of what you do, even though to some people is from the health front, but I do feel like there is a creative aspect to it. And I do believe part of it is because you're also an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to think creatively a lot of times as an entrepreneur, but your mom is also an entrepreneur too. And it's interesting because I realized when I was thinking about some of the entrepreneurs that I have had on this pod, many of them are the first in their families to start a business. So that comes with a different layer of experiences and things that they've had to overcome. But I am curious because your mom's an entrepreneur. She runs her own very successful practice. What do you think have been the lessons from your mom, or maybe if there are other folks who are entrepreneurs in your life, what do you think they have taught you as a business owner?
Once again, as I get deeper and deeper into my own experience as an entrepreneur, I start to look back at all of the things I've witnessed my mom do since she started her own business. And the common thread that has really guided her through just all of the inevitable ebbs and flows of that journey was her connection to God, to Source. And in that, she's been able to muster up so much boldness and courage and creativeness, even though she's taking care of our own family, taking care of her brothers and sisters, and she also works her other job still at Cedar Sinai for almost 20 years. And how do you do all this? And she's always start my day connecting to Goddess Council. In that journey, it's also taught me how much strength we get through connecting to our higher power, God, whatever it is that we find groundedness in. And from, I guess, a technical standpoint, it's believing that there's so much more that we have to give to this world. And I've seen her live by that over and over in the work that she does, and just her relentless pursuit of being, this is what I'm able to give to you because it's a container I've created. I'm just so grateful to be able to witness how she's been able to create the work that she does before I did.
Yeah. As you were saying that, what really came to mind is this is bigger than me. She's here for a larger purpose. And sometimes when people say, how do you do all of that? But I think for her, it's like, I'm here to do big things, but not because of me and having these goals, but I have a bigger purpose to put out there into this world.
I truly believe that. I feel like you really nailed that on the head, because for a little context, my mom started her business when she was just turning 50. And when she opened her med spa, literally 3 days after the pandemic started.
Wow.
That just would have naturally wrecked someone, because those are very hard events or limitations you put on yourself because you tell yourself you're too old, or you tell yourself it's too late, or things like that. She's like, no, I'm just getting started. That was the most amazing thing that you can hear. If she could do it, why can't I?
That's right.
You know?
That's right. I think there's something so powerful because many of my clients are actually like me in our midlife. And I always tell them it's not too late, actually. There's something really powerful about somebody who's older, quote unquote, right, going after their dreams. And what a beautiful example. I didn't realize that her mom didn't start her business until she was 50. I just assumed because it seemed so successful, she's been doing it for a while. But what an amazing example that she was able to provide you and your sister.
Yeah.
I can reinvent myself. I can still go after my dreams, regardless of my age.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for just the stepping stones that she's been able to guide us along through, and the strength that she's also been able to embody, regardless of whatever perceived conditioned limitations society, upbringing, or things in our past may put on us. Prevail every time.
In some ways, it's generational healing. You're both doing it.
How beautiful is that? And when you say something about reinventing ourselves at any given time point in our lives, I really feel like that is a coming back to ourselves, of recognizing true divine potential on this life is, and how revitalizing that is. You know, I'm sure you can also feel the differences in someone living out their purpose, regardless of what age or time frame, versus someone who may have stayed in the dynamic of work for however long because of a place of comfort, or just, you know, getting used to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to dig into your perspective as a business owner. What keeps you motivated to keep going? Because running a business is not, as you know, it's not easy. You are faced with your shadows when you create this thing that you want to put out into this world. What keeps you going?
What's been keeping me going, I mean, I really feel like what keeps me going is this vision of creating spaces and opportunities for people to step into their potential. And when I feel into that and see that in my work day in and day out, it fuels me. Because then if we can just help at least one person self-realize, what a change in their world that will be. And then what a change in the spaces and places around them. Because ultimately, we are all pieces of a puzzle. We're all pieces of this grand vision. I'm learning to light my fire so that all the candles around me can be lit up too. And then it's just a trickle effect. And that's how I believe we can raise the vibrational frequency of the world that we live in. However that looks, whatever vehicle you hold.
That's so beautiful. Like you said, when you're self-realized, when you're self-actualized, you meet your goal. Your goal is not just yours, right? You don't actually understand the impact that it has. And I love your analogy of these lights. When you're lit up, when you're self-realized, it gives permission to somebody else to do that. And especially, right, you and I are both Filipino, we're both women of color. To see an example, because there's so few examples of people that look like us doing their thing.
Yeah,
like how powerful that is.
I mean, it's kind of like watching the Olympics and seeing our people, you know, representing the Philippines. I'm like, yes, let's go. And other countries representing for their people, of which may have experienced historical oppression or very deep-rooted trauma, for them to stand to represent. I mean, it's so beautiful and really empowering.
Yeah, you mentioned something. I want to probe a little bit about it. As folks of color, oftentimes we're not necessarily thought of in certain spaces. I'm thinking about the Olympics, but then you'll see somebody achieve. And I feel like this Olympics in particular, I've seen so many first of something, first ever, breaking down these barriers. And let's bring it back to business. You know, when you're able to create something that you're not dependent on something else, right? What does that mean to you? What is being a business owner? What's the significance of it for you?
Yeah, my perception of running a business, being a business owner, has significantly changed, not just since the time I obviously started, but month by month, daily, has really shifted into, how am I able to transmit what my skill and God-given mission is into the collective. Like, how am I able to use my business as the vehicle in how I can provide whatever it was my role in this place? I'm always thinking of it from not just as me anymore. I feel like when I used to be so driven, naturally as humans, we're going to have some ego, right? We're very like, I want to be the first in this. I have to make this X money, right? Like we put these finite milestones, which are very important, but they're not satisfying and fulfilling. But how can I use my business to make the biggest impact? That's ultimately what has not only fueled me, but that's my intent behind what it means to be a business owner.
And you get to create what that impact is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, with that, keep listening to different perspectives of these new age business owners who are bringing in what they feel like is their ultimate higher purpose or dharma, whatever it is we want to call it, into this earth. They say that our wealth is really a proponent of how much value we're able to provide and serve in the world around us. And that's so motivating because we're always thinking when we're young or we see these very wealthy people, whether it was ethical or not, they made some kind of impact. For instance, Jeff Bezos created Amazon, huge impact. We all have our controversial things around that. Or someone like someone like Sahara Rose, who I admire so deeply and has really awakened a lot of her community to be able to see their dharmic purpose through.
Yeah. And it can look like both, and we get to decide. I think what's a little bit different is that for many of us that are doing this work, it is heart-centered. We're about making social impact for the greater good.
Yeah.
Right? Of the collective, as you say. Yeah, beautiful. So I have only a couple more questions. How can folks get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you? And maybe what are some of your upcoming offerings or anything that you're doing right now?
Anyone who feels called to connect with me, collaborate, or work with me can either find me through my website, angelicaalberto.com. I'll share those links with you so it's easily accessible, or through social media on Instagram or Facebook. I also have a practice based in Mid-City, Los Angeles. So if anyone also feels called to work with me in an in-person setting, I can also share those details as well.
Amazing. And as somebody who works directly with Angelica, I can totally vouch. It's been just a really amazing experience, and to be able to talk shop with somebody who also has a public health background, is also a coach. So it's been really incredible. So my last question to kind of round out this conversation, it's been so rich, by the way. As you know, the title of this podcast is Unlock Your Inner Creator. So Angelica, what does being a creator mean to you?
What being a creator means to me is being self-realized, what my soul's expression feels like doing in this lifetime, what it feels like sharing in this lifetime, and honoring that with just absolute grace and unapologeticness.
Beautiful. Grace to live out your soul purpose. Amazing. Well, Angelica, this conversation has been very full, very rich, as I said. It always is whenever I actually talk to you. This is a lot of medicine for me as well. And it was just really wonderful to hear your story and the folks that have influenced you and your perspective, not just in your practice, but I feel in life as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for this platform and just for your insight too and reflection. I've had such a good time this past hour. Thank you.
Great. Well, that's it for today's episode. We will be back with many more creators, so tune in. Thank you again. Thanks for listening to this episode on the Unlock Your Inner Creator podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to help support this interview series, please make sure to subscribe and tune in to the next episode and share it with others. And remember, dream big, dream bold, and take brave steps. I'll see you next time.